Hello, close friends. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode. This is part 2 of talking politics and pop culture, everything that is going on right now. So we're going to start off this episode by the very crucial, important, huge decision the administration took of renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which obviously was just hurting so many people, and I'm so glad we got that out of the way. Our society is just way better right now somehow. So Grant, what can you tell us? Oh, this is my debate professor, by the way, Grant. The best. I've learned so much from him, so please.
What can I say other than we like naming things, and it's a very uniquely U.S. American perspective. But you know why? It's because it's a paternalistic view. And nothing for nothing. It's the parents who name the name of the children. It is those who are in a position of power that name the whatever it is that you choose to name. Because when you are able to give something a name, you are able to exercise a level of control over it. Now, frankly, and aside from jokes and realities of whether Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America or whatever ought to be the original or name, the only thing this is an exercise of power. It is not meaningful in any sense. If Amerigo Vespucci's name was much more popular and most Americans knew that America is named after Amerigo, that would have been interesting and all that other stuff, but that's all of America's rather than United States of America, which is kind of interesting in of it itself. I think this is all just an exercise of power. We see this exercise of power done both in a service of good and in a service of bad. For example, we saw previous administrations' necessity to rename some of the historical parks and historical mountains and even academies that have served United States for 100 plus years by saying, well, these names aren't culturally or socially or spiritually representative of our set of beliefs, so we reserve the right to change them. There is a unique problem with that, and that problem doesn't lie in whether we're not allowed to rename things, but rather whether we're doing it because it is truly worth or desiring and or needed of change, or we're doing it to appease something. Now, if we were to say that the previous administration did something to appease a particular group of people, well, this administration is doing quite the opposite for exactly the same reasons. And incidentally enough, I'll tell you something. While a lot of people are so fuming about whether a mountain in Alaska needs to be named one thing or another, or the Gulf of Mexico is now going to be Gulf of America, the one thing they're not arguing about is, or they don't have as much energy to argue about, is their living conditions, their social security, their federal and other services that are being cut. Why? Because they spent all that energy arguing about a mountain, and also whether Greenland or Canada. Interestingly enough, and this is my actual problem with it, is that more people are willing to spend energy arguing whether Canada will or will not become the 51st state, and Denmark offering to buy California for $1 trillion, when in reality all of that simply is a waste of time and flex on a part of the government who can do that, because they can exercise their power over the will of seemingly both Western and both Western Hemisphere, but both North and South Americas.
So let's talk about a little more about these claims. What is that even possible, or is just BS?
It's possible, but it's also BS. Let me explain. I'm not trying to. Can we rename anything? It depends how much influence you want to push upon, right? Let's assume.
Sorry, a notion? Do we? Because one thing is to name a park, a mountain that it's in your territory,
in your country,
right? But
yes.
What about the ocean? Who owns the ocean?
Well, that's why nowhere other than Google Maps in United States would recognize that, because it is an illegitimate and
so it's not even.
Of course not. You can't force. I don't know. There's 189 countries in the world. Go to them and tell them, hey, you know what? Your maps need to be changed. Your geography needs to be changed, and you're going to do this. Most
Yeah.
people will not do that unless you're willing to pay for it, unless you're willing to push upon them. Think about it this way. When Cuba became embargoed, vast majority of Latin American country agreed with it. The foundation or legitimacy of embargoing another country has always been problematic. Today, vast majority of Latin American countries are opposed to the Cuban embargo. But how much of actual living change takes place in allowing Cuba to break away from that chokehold that was placed upon it? And the reality is, and that's why I'm not trying to say that it's possible, it depends how serious of an issue this could be and how much United States would like to push other countries. Imagine smaller countries being persuaded to change their maps and to name it Gulf of America for a couple of $1 billion of foreign aid. Which country will say yes versus which country will say no? So I'm hoping, but that won't happen.
And is the U.S. really gonna like send out checks for countries to send? Like if they're trying to save money.
But this is a joke. It's an executive order. This is honestly next president who comes in.
Can you explain what's an executive order?
Absolutely. This one is kind of interesting. Executive orders are a limited way for the president, and it is very limited because they're only permissible for a duration of 90 days, and the only reason that they're able to do it is in a state of emergency. When Congress cannot make decisions quick enough, we allow for the president or executive branch to enforce the law and execute certain particular things for a 90-day duration, which means all of these changes will be reversed within the first day of the next administration. So please, if you're going to invest a lot of money in changing your maps, don't do it now, because in 4 years or 3 years and 11 months, you're probably going to need to change that right back.
Again, yes.
Yes.
And what about all the DEI? Like, how do you think will that really affect society itself? Because I know schools, like public schools, are going to start taking out these programs. How do you think society will change? Like, because I don't think my generation really, we're not going to go back and discriminate anyone because... You know?
Luckily,
So
you are
do think-
much better than Trump's administration could ever be in recognizing both the value, intrinsic and otherwise, of human beings, and you are significantly less racist and sexist and all of those problematic things that the previous generations have exhibited. It's not going to be that easy to make the new generation hate one another. It just doesn't work like that. Luckily, progress is consistent, and even though there could be, certain missteps, which I would call current move towards acting in trying to removing some of those protections that are actually very good ideas to help people, and just unilaterally removing every kind of initiative that would encourage for diversity and inclusion. Well, all of those things are going to be not work exactly the same way as this administration, or for that matter any administration, could do, because the younger generation is not that stupid. You are smart, you are kind, and you're able to see through bullshit.
We care.
And you care. Now, will there be significant problems for a lot of the communities when some of the federal monies that would enable assistance to some of those programs and individuals, when those things get impacted? Absolutely, it's going to be problematic. And I'll be the devil's advocate in this particular instance and say the reality is that some of those departments were not doing their job diligently, and they were not doing their job with full intent to help those very same communities that they speak about helping, which means making those departments better is certainly all of our purpose and all of our goal. This is just simply a way, or at least I'm hoping will be a start of the better conversation, and we will actually help people.
Yeah. Was there a lot of money being spent, or is it an exaggeration?
It is a bit of an exaggeration as of right now. But I have one comparison that I can make. that maybe will make people understand. Specifically, how much money we have spent on combating homelessness, specifically in California. We have spent billions of dollars in order to combat that problem. Arguably, nobody wants their fellow human beings to be without shelter, without means of protecting themselves against the element, and certainly we as a state believe in it, and so we spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. As a matter of fact, the statistics indicates that we spend roughly around 150,000 per homeless person, which means we could have bought all of them condos or something, and we could have solved the problem. Unfortunately, we've been pumping the money into the system, and yet every year we have more homeless people. I'm not trying to say that this is unilaterally or can be solved with money, but clearly whatever programs we've been using were not very, very effective. So maybe we need to revisit how we do those things.
Yeah, and we can save money on other things too, you know? Like it doesn't, why does it have to be diversity? Like the one system you want to remove money from is diversity. Like it just sends a very...
Because it's otherizing, because it's loud,
message.
Because it's also... Its sound bites work significantly better, and it appeals to it appeals to at least a large portion of population. And here we, as an immigrant and also somebody who is around a lot of immigrants, certainly this rhetoric of how we see ourselves versus everybody else plays an important part. Working hard is an American dream. There's nothing wrong with that. Trying to overcome the obstacles is a definitive definition of an American dream, and everybody strives for it, and that's good. And we also tend to be our most biggest critics, which means, unfortunately, our own communities point fingers towards one another and say, well, I was the model immigrant and you were less model, and everybody... and in that particular conflict, we all want to stand up and be patted on the head and like, well, you're the good one. And I think that's where the problem also happens. We don't stand together. And until we do, we're going to have people who will be able to capitalize on those divisions, which is quite the opposite of what inclusion is supposed to mean.
And I just want to explain really quick what DEI is for my Mexican friends that have no clue. So basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understand of it is institutions and big companies have these programs that help minorities, and it can be immigrants or it can be LGBTQ plus communities. And also there's kind of like an expectation to hire diversely. So, you need to have a certain percentage that it's women and men, or you can't just hire like all white men, So it ensures that hiring is diverse. And basically right now, all of that expectations and programs are being removed. So we're just hoping that people hire not being racist or not being sexist, and we just hope that,
And we see that actually happening in a strange way in the most elite institutions within the United States, like, for example, academic institutions like Harvard and Yale and all of those Ivy League schools within this year are demonstratively going to be significantly more diverse and more open. So, doing something bad might sometimes actually lead to something good. So hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay, so I want to talk about Elon Musk. What's the vibe? Like, what do you think about it?
I don't vibe with Elon Musk. I cannot vibe with...
I don't vibe with Elon Musk at all.
No, and here's the thing. I do not think that just because you are the world's wealthiest person means you are the world's smartest person. Which is in no way or another do I want to challenge their ability to understand Teslas and batteries, and I wouldn't know those things, and bless his heart, he does, or computers. But none of those things lead to making the right decisions, because he makes decisions like a CEO. CEO is an organism for a company, and for the company to function, there needs to be a profit, which means he focuses on what is most profitable for that particular entity. Now, if he, as a CEO, he would never fire himself, obviously, because he's the most instrumentally critical element of that particular ecosystem, but he will willingly fire anybody who is he seems or deems to be unnecessary. And as long as he is part of that system and he is winning in that system, then he is doing good. That does not work in a world in which profit isn't the final determining factor. Because he doesn't need to worry about his health care because he has money to be able to ensure that. He is not capable of worrying about his or his children's education because what needs to take place, he will or could theoretically be able to do it. He cannot address the needs of people whose needs he cannot understand. That's my inherent problem with Elon Musk. You cannot empathize with something or someone who you already deem to be not necessary.
Yeah. And you know what? My problem with him, and I dislike him, I started disliking him years ago. Like, it's not even about Trump. It's not even about anything. And my red flag, because, you know, before, I used to respect him a lot, obviously, because he was rich and Tesla and the stock and all this stuff, right? But my red flag started when I was like, okay, he's in cars, he's in space, he's in the Wi-Fi, he's in social media, and now he's in politics. Like, he's literally in every industry. And if we have seen that monopolies are not great, like we're trying to fight certain monopolies, there are institutions, they're not even individuals. Imagine we have an individual that it's a monopoly himself, you know? So how come we don't see that as a danger? Like, how come we're just like, oh, Elon Musk, like,
well, it's easy
success,
to understand,
you know?
Because we are now much more individualistic and we view success no longer as a group or societal well-being, but rather individual. Think of it this way. Turn on any TikTok, any Instagram, go through or scroll through a bunch of pages. Sooner or later, you're going to get some sort of a motivational mantra. Hustle, work, fight. For every person who is, goes out clubbing, I will hustle and I will then go clubbing, and something along those lines, or some combination. Yes, because that's what life matters. That's when you matter, because women will worship you and men will adore you when you have the success. And unfortunately, that is very, very powerful. That message is very powerful. And since we see success as individual, not communal, we no longer desire the outcomes that benefit everybody, rather than, if you are kind to others, you are what's the modern word? Oh yeah, simp. You are weak. You are vulnerable. You are to be taken advantage of. And that's not just bad people who promote that rhetoric. It's everyone.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like how individualistic we've become. I don't like this ideology of just cut people off if they don't serve you. There's some truth to being individualistic and obviously not entertaining toxic relationships, but at the same time, we are not an individual society. Like, we're born to help each other and to build as a society, and right now it's all you don't need anyone, you can do everything, you can and it's like,
and the bad part about that is because when people fall between the cracks, nobody feels guilty, because you didn't hustle hard enough, you didn't work hard enough, you didn't do what you needed to do, which allows us, everyone, to wash their hands of our fellow human beings. Because, if you achieved something, it's because you worked for it. And so that means you're entitled to the benefits and the privileges. And if somebody didn't, well, they didn't work hard enough. It's their problem. And that's how we normalize all of those
and it's
problems.
So crazy because people are so unhappy, and I mean, you're not from here either, but I feel like, for me, I always say that if I could mix Mexico and the US, it will be like the perfect country, because Mexico prioritizes society and like your neighbor, and you see your friends all the time, you become friends with everyone, you're always in people's business, you're always seeing them. And obviously people get stuck, right? Like there's not enough, I would say, motivation. Like
Yeah.
that's the downside. Like people get stuck and get comfortable. So there's some frustration that comes with that. But then I come here and I love how motivated everyone is, and it makes me motivated and it makes me work in my projects. But how come everyone is so unhappy, like so mad,
Oh.
so depressed, so anxious, so like no one like, hey, good morning, smiles at each other, and I just see like unhappiness, and I'm like,
I don't have the answer for that. I do not know how to gauge the happiness of modernity, other than to say part of it has to do with the reality of realistic expectations of what life entails. We stopped being real. In so much as we forgot what the barometer of what is to be expected from life ought to be. And I'm not trying to be cryptic. It's about what is it that we desire from our lives. If what we desire from our lives to be billionaires, which means literally and without any, you are silently in desire of having homeless people. And somebody would say, no, Grant, you're absolutely wrong. Just because I want to have 20 cars does not mean that I want other people to be homeless and without vehicles. But unfortunately, in a world with limited resources, limited time, limited energy, everything is at a premium. And once you accumulate enough of goods for yourself, at which point do you now enjoy the pleasures of wealth as opposed to, and at which price does that come? You use example of Mexico, and Mexico is an excellent example. A lot of people go to Mexico for, Cancun and Puerto Vallarta, and they have all-inclusive
like
deals, hotels, and
resorts.
everything. Like, this is so great. I paid $2,000 for a week, and I got all my drinks and all my food and all my blah 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 blah. And they completely forget about the people who live there, who work there. And the reason that this is so cheap for us is because we're taking advantage of a whole group of people.
Yeah.
And at best, people say, I generously tipped. And at worst, people are like, not my fault.
Well, not Mexico City right now,
Yeah.
because people are just working from home
Mhm.
and buying houses, doing Airbnbs, and now locals can't rent.
And
You
which
know?
hurts those who have excessive income, and now they can own 5 or 6 houses. And that's not just an American problem, that's a literally world level of problem. All of a sudden, you price out those people who were struggling to have a family home. They now cannot, because there is enough people competing for their 5th investment property or whatever.
Yeah, like come on, and it's interesting because one of the polls that I did as well was like, what's society's biggest issue, and basically I said, what's society's biggest issue, and the options were economy, corruption, hate and division, or lack of order. And just 10% said economy, which is wild because so many, everyone does, it's like what we're saying, everyone does so much for money, and money becomes this like main goal in everyone's lives. Yet when you ask people what society's biggest issue, how it's being like interpreted is division, it's not economic.
I think part of it is connected with end results. If everybody was to put, like, we took random 100 people and say, how do you envision your life as a wealthy person? Everybody would put themselves in Monaco or in some jets and in some luxurious setting. And each of those visualizations and expectations would be come at the price of significantly larger group of people not having. And since we have normalized that, we no longer see economy as a problem. We only see economy as a problem when we don't have money. But once we do have it, most people are going to go for the cream of the crop or whatever happens to be, and we will normalize every path to get there. And since we've already made those morally questionable choices for ourselves, we are less likely to forgive other individuals, and so it creates that particular conundrum.
Yeah, very interesting. So I just want to ask you this one last question. What is the role of religion in all of this?
uh, religion. Foundationally, right, religion is supposed to be a guiding principle that allows us to be able to be better. Um, let's begin with "Thou shalt not judge, lest ye be judged." Somehow, that particular passage from the scriptures is lost on everybody. Why? Because that would force us to stop judging other people. And if we go to the New Testament and we say that the one without the sin should cast the first stone, that's the problem today. We do not take the moral lessons of the religion. We take the discipline of the religion. And I think that's part of the problem. Not to say that there cannot be discipline, and I'm not here to say whether people ought or ought not to have faith, but I think religion was always necessary in order for us to have some communal way to be able to connect on shared moral principles. And in religious context, it was always objectivity, right? Like, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not hurt, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not, etc., and etc., and etc. They're absolute. They're not like, well, maybe sometimes, or, maybe under the circumstance, and we all agree on it. And of course, some people will make mistake, but we as a whole would say, you know what? Murdering is bad. Like, it's not a new concept. Stealing is bad. It's not a new concept. Can we understand when we break that particular commandment? Of course we understand. But think about it this way. Heck, we made money of coveting each other's spouses. We literally normalized that particular behavior, and religion helped with that. Yeah. And that's the problem, right? Like, are we talking about religion as an institution, organization, or as a medium of faith? And I think I can't answer your question directly, because religion as faith and something that gives us guidance is a great thing. Religion as deciding who will be slaves, as Catholicism decided that black people ought to be, as opposed to indigenous people residing in America simply because they were unfamiliar with the scriptures. That is evil and foundationally bad. And I'm not even going to go into the mega churches. They're truly evil. The role of the religion has lost its directive because it now has directly lost to the competing moral principles. Not good principles, but...
Yeah, we're just using it to judge, to divide, to condemn, and completely forgetting the part of, like, it's about having faith, it's about having community and motivation. Okay, what's your conclusion? And what can we do to make this a little more positive, little more peaceful? What can we do?
Take a deep breath, folks. The world isn't going to implode. We're not going to die. And when we do die, then it's our time. Don't worry about the evil that could happen. Focus on the evil that is happening right now. Don't worry about the things that are going to take place in the future, especially if right now, right this moment, you can extend your hand and help your fellow human beings, and you can do that. Recognize that the things that divide us are always going to be significantly smaller than the things that unite us. We all do not want to be hurt. We all want to be loved. We all want to be safe. We all want to be able to, as a parent, for my children to be healthy and be happy and survive in this world to the best of their abilities. And so as long as we actually focus on those positive things, we can overcome a whole lot of negativity.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. The things that divide us are smaller than the things that unite us. I love that. Yeah, so for me, I think we need to remember that our voices are important and that we need to be unified, and we don't need to just attack, defend. And even though it feels like a lot, we do need to know history and know that we've been here before. It's nothing new. We're going to be fine. And just remember that we're not going to be silent. We're not going to be compliant. We're not going to have fear. We just are going to stay strong. So, yeah, that's all. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Grant. And we'll see you next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.